What up, guys? It has come to my attention that they're gonna do the summer reruns for the next update, which is gonna be like the Black Ranger event thingamabobber. Anyways, I figured I should do a should you summon on some of the reruns right now, and also there are some interesting choices that they made. But also, I saw some people being confused whether that means this current event that's coming up will be taking the place for the summer event, which I don't think so. Most summer events are in July. Like, this is last year's. It was the second week of July, basically. The year before that was at the first week of July. And then the year before that, I think this was the double one, right? No, this was the Sakura and Rosanna, right? Wait, no. The last year was Sakura and Rosanna. I just passed. Am I stupid? This was the one where they had two. It was the Mary and Neon. And then right here in this one, I guess I can just click them, why not? This is the Mary and Neon right here, and then that same year they had Summer Anise and Summer Helm. So there's that. Anyways, first things before I start, they said that the banners, these ones will end on July 11th. I'm pretty sure all of the reruns will end on July 11th. So I would say even before you like pull the trigger, I'd say just wait till like perhaps the last minute, so that you can see what the new previews are for the next summer units that will be releasing this year. I hope that that will release in like early July. I didn't even check when the, what's it called, the Black Ranger event goes away. Dang it. Let's see, hold on. If it's gonna be up like here, let's see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I mean, it could be the first week of July. Wait, but it doesn't even matter, because if it's the second week, the banners will go away on the 11th, so we should be able to see, at the very least, a live stream, and in that live stream, they'll show us the characters for the next summer event and that stuff. So, before I even start, I would say just chill and kind of play the field and then see what the next units that release are coming out. But also, they will only be dropping 6, so it'd be Summer Anise, Summer Helm, Summer Sakura, Summer Rosanna, Summer Mary, and Summer Neon. I have Dorothy and Oleg pulled up because I want to talk to them regardless. However, they did not list Dorothy or Oleg yet, which is kind of weird, but we'll see what happens. So, unfortunately, we will see what they end up doing with them. But anyways, starting off with Summer Anise here. I'm going to go over some of their kits, just a quick refresher, and to refresh it for myself, because I have no idea what like Neon does, or Mary does, or Helm Summer does, so it'll be good for me to refresh my memory. But essentially, Anise is an electric shotgun, and for the most part, she's used as a support for the electric team. So her skill 1 activates when entering full burst, affects all electric code allies. It gives them an attack buff for 10 seconds, and reload speed buff also for 10 seconds. And their skill 2 activates when firing the last bullet, affects 2 enemy units with the highest final attack, deals 380% of final attack as damage, and then activates when firing the last bullet, affects self, damage 2 interruption parts, up about 7% for 10 seconds. And then her burst, 40-second cooldown, normal, affects self, max ammo capacity down about 74% for 10 seconds, reload speed up for about 28% for 10 seconds, and elemental advantage attack damage up for 42%. So essentially, I mean, as you see there, you mainly want to use her as the support for like the electric team. Like, let's say you have a really good Cindy, and let's see, what other like electrics? I guess you could use her with like the new Neon, but I don't know, there's a lot of good options. I feel like a lot of these reruns for me are going to be if you really want them, or at least have them as an option. Some of them are just going to be like a flat out probably skip unless you're doing really well resource wise and you like the characters. But for Anise, I think there is like pretty decent usage for solo raids. For example, if you're going to use her for like bossing, especially on like mono electric, if you like running mono electric, for example, she could be very helpful there. Granted, it is a little wonky using her on some teams, because I believe Tove, I should have brought this up, dang it. Whatever, I'm not going to bring it up, but I believe Tove and some other like units, for the most part, they give like ammo back, or they raise the ammo capacity, stuff like that. You know, regularly good support for most units. The problem is, because Anise has a last bullet mechanic, I feel like something like that would be a bit detrimental for her. So especially if you're going to use her as a main burst to do damage, granted, you don't need to do that, right? You can just have her on the off rotation, just give this support and then give this reload speed too, and not really care about all of this stuff, right? The good part, though, about Annis versus also someone else who is kind of like a mono-electric support, like the Winter Maiden, is I found that Winter Maiden gives better buffs to the electric team. However, Winter Maiden is locked behind that electric team having type advantage, whereas Annis here can give electric team buffs regardless of what the boss typing is. The only thing is, if you're going to use her as a main burst, obviously she's not going to get this, unless she has type advantage against the boss, right? But anyways, for the most part, I would say if you want more options for like electric teams, maybe if you want to run mono electric, or if you want to maybe do a little bit better on solo raids against an electric weak boss, then I would say it's not the worst to get at least one copy of her. But I mean, if you don't really care about that and you maybe want to bank on getting the Winter Maiden. Winter Maiden does like fill similar spots to Annis, but like I said before, Winter Maiden is only when your electric team has type advantage, so keep that in mind. Sometimes their buffs aren't going to be active the whole time, so it'll be a bit more finicky, but yeah, I think this is probably the best out of the reruns. It's between her and Rosanna, I'd say, but next up is Helm Summer. Honestly, I have her, and I don't think I've ever used her. I think I have seen people cope use her for solo raids that are weak to water. I didn't see anybody using her, though, the last solo raid, so there's that. But she's a burst 2. Oh, I don't think I mentioned, but Annis is burst 3. Whoops. This Summer Helm right here is burst 2. She is water, and she has, what, an AR? Okay, yeah, an AR. So her skill 1 activates after launching 30 normal attacks, affects the target, deals 131% of final attack, adds additional damage, activates when entering full burst, affects all allies. Effect changes according to the number of activation times. Previous effects trigger repeatedly. Cooldown of burst skill 1.8 seconds, twice. Cooldown of burst skill 2.2 seconds, 3 times. Cooldown of burst skill 2.6 seconds. And then her skill 2 has a cooldown of 4 seconds and it affects one enemy unit randomly, deals 105% of final attack as damage, activates when attacking an electric code target, affects the target. Damage taken up 5.6%, stacks up to 5 times and lasts for 5 seconds. And then her burst is regular cooldown, affects all enemies, deals 164% of final attack as burst damage, activates when attacking an electric code target, affects the target, deals 164% of final attack as additional damage. Also, did I say she was water? I meant she was iron. I don't remember if I said she was water. Whoops. I meant iron, so I might have got that mixed up. Oopsies. But I'm not gonna lie, Helm is kind of finicky because I think I have seen people cope her in solo raids before, but she's in this weird spot where she kind of does damage, but the main shtick is she also gives like CDR, which is cool, but nowadays, like, every good burst 1 has CDR, so there's kind of not really any point of having 2. Now, if this was like burst generation or something else, then it'd be like, okay, well, this is actually useful nowadays, but for the most part, it's like CDR, which maybe you could run on a specific team where your burst 1 doesn't have CDR, if you're using like someone's treasure, I guess, like Maybe's Way, or maybe like Miranda, but even still, I feel like that's kind of cope, and I would want to, you know, go against an electric boss where she has type advantage as an iron unit. Granted, she also makes the enemy take more damage, but, you know, only when the boss is electric and she has type advantage, so it's kind of finicky. But other than that, I mean, even the CDR is, like, kind of mediocre to what, like, some of the cooldowns numbers are for, like, units nowadays, especially because this has to, like, build up, so it's kind of like litter in that sense, which is a bit worse than a lot of the other units with CDR, so there's that. I would have to probably just relegate her to only being used when she has type advantage in a solo raid, but even still, I feel like I would have way better choices, especially because we should be getting some new treasure units on the horizon, probably for the summer. We got some last year that was shown during the summer live stream last year, so we'll see if they do that again this year. I guess that wouldn't really matter for like summon wise, but you know, saving resources as well is what I take into account for some of these reruns as well. But anyways, yeah, Helm, I would say probably skip. You don't really need this too bad. Granted, we don't really have a lot of iron options for solar rays that aren't like limiteds or I guess collab characters and stuff, but I mean, even still, I think there's probably better options, and you're probably worth getting somebody else. It's just way too finicky for her. You can cope with her, I would say, so like it's not like it would be a waste, whereas, you know, we'll get to the waste characters in a second, but I definitely think it's probably a safe skip, unless your favorite character is Helm, I suppose, or something, but anyways... Next up is the Summer Sakura. Now, Summer Sakura is also kind of like a cope unit. She is pretty fallen off, I would say, but... Okay, so Sakura is an AR attacker, she's Wind, and she's a Burst 3. So her skill 1 activates at the start of the battle, affects self. Forcefully use a skill 2. Activates when an ally or self destroys an enemy part, affects self-sustained damage up 5% for 30 seconds. Activates when an ally or self destroys an enemy part. Affects self if in Dancing Flower status. Dancing Flower status will be up for 10 seconds. Activates when an ally or self destroys an enemy part. Affects all enemies who are in Sakura's Petal status. It increases that duration for 10 seconds. Now, skill 2 has a cooldown of 30 seconds. Affects self Dancing Flower attack damage up 15% for 15 seconds. And it affects the enemy with the highest final attack. It gives them Sakura Petals, which deals 256% of final attack as sustained damage every 1 second for 15 seconds. Now her burst is a regular cooldown, and it affects random enemies, deals 547% of final attack as damage, attacks sequentially for 10 times. And it affects the same targets, it deals 35% of final attack as sustained damage every 1 second, stacks up to 10 times, and lasts for 10 seconds. Now, I think Sakura was okay when she came out. The problem is, we don't really have much support for her, and I mean, one, her numbers nowadays are like not good. Like these numbers for her attack is just not it, and it just can't keep up with modern units. But even still, she has a lot of the sustained damage gimmick, which if you don't know what sustained damage is, it's essentially a dot, and it's a bit different than distributed damage, which is what a lot of units have nowadays, and I think a lot of units buff. I don't remember off the top of my head like who buffs sustained damage, other than, I mean, some of Rosanna right here, but for the most part, I think nowadays only really distributed damage is buff. And then like she's Wind, I don't think you're gonna find any use for her Wind wise. Like the Wind units you want to be using are obviously like Libby and Black Shadow and stuff, so it's kind of hard to get her in here, especially if you have like, I don't know, the second wave Asuka and I think second wave Ray. Both of them are Wind, I believe. You could use them too. I feel like they're okay in certain situations, but like Sakura right here, I can't see using ever. I don't think she'll be able to hold her own at all. She has some interesting tech with like the sustained damage, and like if the boss has a lot of parts, you can get a lot of extra damage procs, but even still, I don't think a lot of bosses recently have parts. The last boss that had parts was Altria, I think. Was that her name? Or was it the sword chick? No, it was the sword chick. What was her name? Dang it, I forgot. It was the ugly bitch. Oh no, I think I forgot. I don't think it was Altria though. I think it was that girl. I don't know what her name is though. Dang it, whatever. She had parts, but even still, I think she was weak to iron. I don't remember, but I would definitely not use her at all. So yeah, no, it's just kind of grief because originally when I was playing, I MLB her because I liked her, and you know, I just don't even use her. She was the one that got me past the 160 wall. She's in my synchro device as like one of the MLB units, which is kind of funny because now she's like just worthless. At the very least, she looks pretty in my box, but yeah, I would recommend skipping her unless you really like Rosanna and you have extra resources, but like I don't see any fights where you're gonna find use with her, especially if you have a lot of good Wind units. Then like this is just kind of a waste, but there is that. Next up is Rosanna. Oops, I'm going to scroll down a little bit earlier. So Rosanna is also Wind. She's a Burst 2, and she's a supporter. She has an AR as well. Now, her skill 1 activates when entering battle, affects all allies, damage to parts up 24% for 15 seconds, activates when an ally or self-destroys an enemy part, affects all allies, gives them an attack buff for 3%, and it stacks up to 5 times and lasts for 30 seconds. Now, her skill 2 has a cooldown of 30 seconds, affects all allies, damage to parts up 24% for 15 seconds, affects the enemy nearest to the crosshair, deals 70% of final attack as sustained damage every 1 second for 15 seconds. And her burst is regular cooldown, it affects all allies, gives them a sustained damage buff for 20 seconds, and it affects all the enemies and makes them take 32% more damage for 10 seconds. Now, unlike Sakura, Rosanna actually could be useful in some solo raid scenarios, but I do think Burst 2s are pretty competitive nowadays, especially with the Preek and Mint combo that literally just finished dropping. So I would say if you have better options, you can pretty easily skip her, but you could also have some use for her. She does buff sustain damage, which is like kind of meh, but you know, this damage taken buff right here that she gives makes the enemy take more damage is always pretty good. I feel like units that have this are at the very least pretty useful, even though I was just talking shit about, you know, damage to parts stuff last time when I was talking about Sakura. I think this is kind of like meh, right? But it's at least decent to have. But this is probably what you're going to get the most value of, just making the enemy take more damage. I do like doing that. I don't think she's going to do like any damage. I mean, she is a support, and the main thing that she does is like this damage. She does some sustained damage, but other than that, it's just buffing damage to parts, which is like cool, I guess. But this is probably like the main good thing that she will do. But yeah, other than that, I think she would probably be my second choice to go for, maybe tied with Annis. It kind of depends on what you're looking for. If you don't want another attacker, then you can probably put Rosanna like more valuable than Annis here, but I would probably put them same tier, maybe Annis a little bit better. But like I said before, if you already have a lot of good Burst 2 options, you're not missing out too much. Let's see, when's the last time we had a boss that was weak to wind? Were people using this for Rosanna? I don't remember. I think there was, but I think it's been a while since we got a boss that was weak to wind. Whatever, let's just move on to Mary now. Now, these next two are going to be quick because I'm not going to lie, I've never used them before, and I don't want to use them. So there's that. Now, Mary here has a sniper, she's burst 1, and she's water. Her skill 1 activates when entering full burst, affects all allies. Effects change according to the number of activation times. Previous effects trigger repeatedly. So first trigger, it recovers 1% of caster's final max HP every 1 second for 5 seconds. Second time it triggers, recovers 3% of a caster's final max HP every 1 second for 5 seconds. And then the third cast trigger, it will recover 6.8% of caster's final max HP every 1 second for 5 seconds. Now it does say previous effects trigger repeatedly, so what that means is when you get this proc, it'll also proc this one. I'm not really sure if it will like be additive or whatever. I think it's like separate procs, so I'm not really sure how that would work in total, but essentially you proc this one, you'll proc these two, you'll proc this one, and you'll proc the first one as well, along with that one that will proc. But I mean, it's just healing, which we probably have better options right now. But anyway, skill 2. So for her skill 2, activates when using burst skill, affects all water cold allies. Effect changes according to the number of activation times. Previous effects trigger repeatedly. So first trigger, elemental advantage attack damage up 20% for 3 seconds. Second trigger, elemental advantage attack damage 13% for 5 seconds. The third trigger, elemental attack damage up 8% for 10 seconds. Just like before, if you proc the third proc, you'll get these two. And also, I'm not sure if it adds up, but essentially it'll just give you more damage if you have a type advantage, you know, if you're water, that is. So there is that. Now her burst skill is regular cooldown, affects all water code allies, gives them attack damage buff up 23% for 3 seconds, and it also gives them max HP up 28% of the caster's final max HP for 10 seconds. Now, she has a lot of buffs, and you know, she has some pretty decent regen, but she is burst 1, and she does not have CDR, so like, you will not use this at all. There's just actually no shot nowadays you use any burst 1 that does not have CDR, unless their buffs are crazy and there's some secret tech, or maybe they're like a reburst 1. So like, literally the only people I would use probably that do not have CDR as burst 1 are the Miranda Treasure, because her buffs are really good, and usually I run a second burst 1 that has CDR. the Tove treasure because she's pretty good on the shotgun team, and also I run a second burst one that has CDR. And the third one is I saw people using Zwei, which I don't have Zwei up, but maybe I could foresee me using Zwei depending on the solo raids. But also with her, I would probably want to use another burst one that has CDR. You're following here? So because of that, I would not see me using Mary at all. The buffs she gives are just not as good as like someone like Miranda, like I was talking about, or Zwei, where I would then cope and put a burst one that has CDR so I can give that team CDR, because that burst one that does not have CDR buffs are really good and worth me doing that, right? Mary just does not have that, so, you know, this is an easy skip unless you really, really want Mary, but just keep in mind that she's just probably going to rot in your box, so, you know, there's that. Now, next up is Summer Neon. She has a machine gun, she's water, and she's burst 3. Now, her skill 1 activates when turning full burst, affects self. Effects changes according to the number of activation times previous effects trigger repeatedly. First trigger, damage to parts up 12% for 20 seconds. Second trigger, damage to parts up 12% for 20 seconds. And then third trigger does the same thing, right? And just like before, if you proc the third one, it'll proc the other two, but like damage to parts, not that good. Second skill activates when entering a burst stage 3, affects self. Effects changes according to the number of activation times previous effects trigger repeatedly. First trigger, elemental advantage attack damage up 20% for 10 seconds. Second trigger, the same thing, and third trigger, the same thing. Very copy and pasty here with Neon. And then her burst, regular cooldown, affects self, changes the weapon in use, damage 33% of final attack, and it lasts 7 seconds. Activate when attacking a fire code target, affects the target, deal 11% of final attack as additional damage. Now, this is quite literally bare bones. I believe, like Mary, this was, I think, the first year the game was out, this came out, right? So this is like nothing, especially, I mean, we'll take a look at a leg, but you should keep this kit in mind when you take a look at a leg and see the difference in wards. But like before, she's just not going to be doing any damage. Her numbers aren't that good. I mean, she has this gimmick for damage to parts, which you're not going to get much value nowadays with a lot of bosses and stuff. And, I mean, she's locked behind only really going against fire bosses when she'll have type advantage, so she can, at the very least, take advantage of her skill 2, because, like, if you're not going against a boss that she has type advantage with, you're basically just using the skill 1. And then, let's say, for example, that boss does not have parts, you're just not using any of this. You're just using, like, this, and that's it. So, like, it's just not even good. So, not much to talk about with Neon. Easy skip, please. Unless Neon is your favorite, then, you know, cope and get one, but she's just gonna rot in your box. So, there is that. Next up, I want to go over Dorothy and Alleg real fast. They did not say that they were going to be rerun when the update drops, and I'm not really sure if they'll be rerun, like, after the summer event goes up or something, which is why I would say you should probably wait until the rerun banners are about to be over and see if we get information on the new summer event one, because, you know, see if those units that release are going to be really nice and you're going to want them more than the reruns maybe, but also to see that maybe they'll rerun Dorothy and Alleg next after, or maybe like at the same time of that new summer event. But now Dorothy is interesting because she is our first Pilgrim 1% limited. She is water and she has a shotgun. Now, her skill 1 activates when hitting the target with 80 pellets, affects self, gains pierce for 3 rounds, hit rate up 98% for 3 rounds, attack damage up 72% for 3 rounds, pellet count is fixed at 1 for 3 rounds, and activates when hitting the target with 160 pellets, affects self, extends pierce range by 200% for 3 rounds. Skill 2 activates when entering a battle, affects self, pierce damage up 55% continuously, activates only during full burst, affects self, attack 75% continuously, hit rate up 40% continuously. And her burst affects self, attack speed up 65% for 15 seconds, attack up 88% for 15 seconds, and number of pellets up 5 for 15 seconds. Now, Dorothy is kind of bare bones if you kind of look at it like this, but she is very good. She gains pierce, This like little thing right here where pellet count is fixed at 1 is kind of like a slug shot essentially, but that slug shot gains pierce this much damage, and I mean it's just gonna do a lot of damage, especially because most of the time you'll get this when you're bursting, because essentially, so when you're bursting the number of pellets will go up, so it'll be easier to get this proc up her passive. So once you get this proc, you'll get like this attack damage up, and then like if you proc that wall in full burst, you'll be able to get this attack damage proc up. And you know, she's just going to be getting this pierce support damage to herself the whole time. She's going to hit really hard. I really recommend, if she does get rerun, to use your gold tickets on her, because she is 1% limited and it's kind of like finicky to summon on her. If you don't have enough gold tickets, I would say try to get at least one copy. She is really good, especially as a kind of like anchor on the Shotgun Tove team with her treasure. If you don't have Tove's treasure, you can use Dorothy without like this whole Shotgun team, building the whole Shotgun team around her. And I'd say she will perform around the same. She doesn't need to be on the Shotgun team to be good. You can kind of just stick her on a regular team. But I do like using her on the Shotgun team just to have that be like the third or fourth option for a solo raid. But I mean, even regardless, I think the Shotgun team does pretty well. It's just that, for the most part, it is kind of like a certain team you want to use with the Shotgun team. Because if you want to use Tove's treasure, you're going to probably want to use either Soda Bunny to extend the burst, because that team won't have CDR, or you want to use the Winter Soline, so that Soline will give CDR to the whole team. And then you probably want to run like the Alt Arcana. Alt Arcana will buff shotguns pretty well. But I mean, if you don't have her, you can just like sub in any other burst too. That will probably work decently. And the only problem with the shotgun too is you're going to lack healing a bit. So depending on the boss, you might want to play safe, or else you might just get your ass blasted. Best case scenario though is if we get another really good burst 3 shotgun for that team. Currently, I would say the only other like attack you're using for that team is Dorothy, maybe the Soda Bunny if you're not going to be using CDR, or the Drake's Treasure. I think Drake's Treasure isn't the worst, but I mean, the damage that Dorothy does here compared to Drake is like night and day. She just cannot keep up with Dorothy. It's just like not even fair. So I definitely would say if they end up rerunning her, maybe have enough gold tickets to just grab one copy of her. But if you don't, I still would try to recommend to get one. It's like not required, but like, I don't know, the shotgun team is so nice to just have in your back pocket. And I mean, regardless, Dorothy by herself is not too bad, because we are missing a lot of decent water hitters for like solo raids and stuff. So I would say at least try to get Dorothy. If all of the summer reruns are on the table, I would say Dorothy's far and away the number one like priority. You want to get at least one. And then it's kind of like the rest, if you really want them to like fill out your box, or maybe you see yourself having them run on your solo raid team eventually, but there's that. Anyways, let's go to a leg. Now, just like with Dorothy, they didn't say they were going to rerun the leg, so maybe they'll do that after. I would just say wait, and near when the banners will go away around like July 11th, maybe they'll have the live stream up for the summer event, or we'll be starting to get previews for that. But anyways, she is a machine gun, water, and a burst 3. And here we have a paragraph to read. Now, her skill 1 activates when entering battle, affects one random enemy with possession, lasts for 6 seconds. Ability, find and capture ghosts possessing the enemy. Required hit count 100 times in total, and that is cumulative across all allies. Now, the effect is captures one ghost. When the required hit count reaches 100%, a maximum of 13 ghosts can be captured, recurring interval 6 seconds. Affects all water code allies. Effects differ based on the number of ghosts. Previous effects trigger repeatedly. Only activates when there is at least one ghost. Attack up 60% of the casters. Attack continuously. Only activates when there are more than 4 ghosts. And it gives the elemental advantage. Attack damage up 35% continuously. Now, essentially her thing is when you go into a stage, and this is easier to do with like a boss, because obviously, you know, they're one enemy, so that one enemy is going to be possessed guaranteed. But when you go into a stage, one enemy is going to get this like possessed thing, and you have to hit him with 100 shots equally like everybody. So everybody can combine hit him like 100 times, and you'll capture them. And this like possession thing will happen every 6 seconds. So 6 seconds, you get the proc done, and then another 6 seconds it'll happen, and then you get the proc done. Actually, I'm not really sure if it's like you have 6 seconds to do it and it'll proc again instantly, or like it's once you capture it, you then get the other proc. I think it's you have to capture it first. Yeah, because that wouldn't make sense, because then multiple people could be possessed at once. I'm actually not sure how it works. I don't remember, but anyways, depending on how many you have captured, you'll be getting like attack buffs, or you'll be buffing all of your water code allies to do more damage. I guess this is all water code, but you know what I mean. This will do more damage if you're going against a fire boss with a lot of your water allies on the team. So it is kind of finicky with this goofy ass mechanic, but it's not the worst in bossing scenarios, because I mean there's only one enemy getting possessed, so you'll be able to farm up this like passive thingy not too bad. Now skill 2 activates when using burst skill, affects the self attack up 40% for 10 seconds. Activates when a ghost is captured while at maximum ghost capacity, affects all enemies, deals 1100% of final attack as damage. Now her burst regular cooldown affects random enemy units if the number of ghosts is not 13, deals 800% of final attack as damage, attacks sequentially for 6 times, number of ghosts down 6, maintains at least 1 ghost. Affects random enemy units if the number of ghosts is 13. It deals 800% of final attack as damage. Attacks sequentially for 13 times. Number of ghosts down 9. Now, there is like, I guess, a tech. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the most knowledgeable when it comes to this like a leg thingy for solo raids. I was using her a bit because she gives this. In the last solo raid, I was buffing a lot of my water units. I believe I was running her. I think I was running Helm and Winter Ludmilla, and I was main bursting with Ludmilla and Helm, and then she was just there to give some buffs. And I think every once in a while, once she got max stacks, I would be bursting with her. I mean, she'll do this, which is decent damage, but like even if you don't burst with her, she'll be given this support, which is like okay, and then I mean she'll be doing this damage to everybody, which is like okay as well. I don't think it's the craziest, but I also think it's a nice option to have because, like I said before, we don't have very good water attackers for like solo raid stuff. What is this like wiki put her at? S? I mean, yeah, I suppose that's fair. That being said, like this is another one of these only really pulled if you want another option for solo raids and you want specifically to do better in the solo raids that are weak to water. So, I mean, there's that, right? If you don't really care about solo raid rankings, I feel like all of these reruns are kind of useless unless you just want them to have them in your box, right? But yeah, I would say this is like maybe lower priority than Summer Anise and Summer Rosanna, maybe around the same level. I mean, both of them I would say only really get if you want more options for a solo raid specifically in a scenario where those will perform better than usual, but I don't know, it's kind of a bit wonky. I did expect Aleg to be a little bit better for like campaigning because she has a lot of like affect all enemies and stuff, but that did not be the case, unfortunately. So there's that, but I mean, there are other better units to prioritize, obviously, like many things, but I think that is everything for a lot of the summer reruns. Now, like I said before, the last two, Dorothy and Aleg, were not mentioned in the rerun, so I'm not sure if they're happening maybe after the summer event or once the summer event comes out. We don't really know, and I would say that you should probably wait until maybe last minute to decide whether you want to pull on some of the reruns or not. Maybe then they'll release more previews for the summer events. Maybe they'll mention that Dorothy and Aleg will be getting rerun. Who knows? But I think that is everything. Jeez, I was just yapping for like 40 minutes almost. But I think this is fine. I wanted to do this now because if I would wait, then I could have done, I guess, the like new like Black Ranger details, but then you'd be dealing with like 5 in the morning zombie ren, and I don't think that'd be worth, right? I think it's better to just do this. There's no shame or foul. So anyways, that's enough rambling for me. Let me know what you guys think about the upcoming summer reruns, and if you are going to summon for any of them, let me know which one you want to go for. Also, if you want to support the channel, subscribing and sharing is very appreciated. And I'll catch you guys Later.